All this talk about civil society and democracy is making me think about kids. But then I can't stop thinking about kids. Kids, all the time. Crianzas, los niños, watota, haisaman, bache, habana, enfant, bambinos. Wherever you go, however you want to say it, kids are speaking up and standing up, and they want their voices to be heard. Thank goodness. When kids have a voice, civil society becomes more civil, and democracy becomes more democratic. In fact, I'd say kids are the next great leap for democracy, the next great leap for our world, towards a world of peace and justice and equality. But to leap, kids need rights, like the right to associate and form organizations to stand up for their common interess, the right to express themselves and have a say in the policies that govern their schools and their communities and their lives. And when kids don't have a say, that really bothers me. Maybe it's partly because I'm a pediatric nurse. Take my patient, Ray. Let's call him Ray, for example. Ray was 15 years old when he rolled through the doors of my hospital unit recently on a stretcher. His eyes were rolled back, and a sheet was partly covering him and the bloody tube that stuck out of his side. Through that tube drained fluid from the bullet hole in Ray's lung, and on his neck was a tattooed $sign. I thought about that $sign as I rolled Ray into his room. Ray obviously cared about finances. But did he have a real say about the economic policies of his life? Was he able to vote for funding for his school or the after-school program that might have kept him safe and healthy? Was he able to have any say about the minimum wage rate at his job or that of his parents' jobs? Could he vote for a legislator that could represent him and his interests? As I put Ray into his bed, I thought about these things, and I wondered when and how they would change. Because this situation is not only bad for Ray, but it's a human rights violation, a serious one. And it's also bad for all of us who are deprived of young ideas that could take us forward. And Ray is not alone. He's joined by young people all over the world who are paying the price for policies made by adults, policies that they had absolutely no say in. But I have hope, because right in the brains of teenagers are qualities that help them not only stand up for their rights, but stand up for all of us and take our world forward. Like a willingness to take risk. This could be a problem if they're practicing new tricks on their skateboard, but this wonderful quality is also perfect for helping kids not be stuck in the old ways and to try new things. Young people also have a great energy and a positive way of thinking. It's right in their extra dose of dopamine in their brain. And those are qualities that really come in handy, especially when you're about to take a risk. Kids have a new perspective. They see things with new eyes, new ideas for new problems that they see in our world. Maybe it's like a 6th grader told me recently, "We're just fresher." And I said, "Yes, you are fresher, girl. You go on. With your fresher eyes, your fresher way of seeing things." Young people also have a sense of fairness and compassion. A teenager named Tim came up to me after a program I gave recently at his high school, and he said, "You know, I really liked your speech, and I really appreciate what you're saying. I'm not trying to criticize you or anything, but could you please be sure to also talk about love?" And I say, "Yeah, Tim, thank you so much for that reminder, because it really is all about love. The love and respect we have for every voice in our democracy, for every person's ideas, including young people." Young people also have a quality that Einstein said is more important than knowledge: imagination. There's a woman right now named Grace Lee Boggs, and she's in Detroit leading an intergenerational community effort to transform that bankrupt auto center of the United States from what didn't work to what will work. And she said that there are times in history that call for an expansion of the imagination, and that we are in one of those times. Young people are perfect for this transformation with their wonderful imaginations. And then there's a quality that puts it all together, which is the willingness and eagerness of young people to take action. Now, all of this talk about young people and their great qualities is reminding me of another reason why I think about kids so much and their rights. It's because I was a kid, and I wanted rights. I wanted the right to stand up and speak up for peace. And so I took a risk, I thought positively, I took action, and I won some rights at the United States Supreme Court when I was 16 years old in 1969. It all started when I was growing up in Iowa in the middle of the United States, during a time a lot like now, with great inequality and racial discrimination, war, and the war economy. But people were standing up and speaking up for a better way, and a lot of them were young people. I had no idea, but I would soon be one of them. My father was a Methodist minister, and I was one of the youngest of 6 children. I was very shy. But in church, we would sing songs like, "Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world." I loved that song. The problem was, not everybody loved all the little children. Like the swimming pool down the street that wouldn't let the little black children swim there. But the young people in the church, they thought we could do better. And they decided to speak up, and they asked my father to help. And so they went and complained to the authorities, who said, "That's the way it's always been," as we hear so often. But the kids didn't give up. They kept speaking up and standing up. And now that swimming pool lets everyone swim there. I just met some lifeguards, in fact, who work there, and they were telling me about it. But as a result, my father became very unpopular in that town, and he got put out of that church. And we had to move to a new town, Des Moines, Iowa. I started to learn that when you speak up and stand up, it doesn't always make you popular, but it's a good way of life. And it's so worth it. And I started to learn that it's the small actions by ordinary people that do make a difference and that do make history. In our new town, our eyes and the eyes of the world started to turn south to the growing civil rights movement in places like Mississippi and Alabama. A few years earlier, a young woman challenged the Jim Crow segregation laws by refusing to get up off of the white section of the bus. She said her history teacher had taught her about her rights. I know you're probably thinking of Rosa Parks, but I'm talking about Claudette Colvin. She was 15 years old when she refused to get up off of the bus, and she said that she had her rights. As a result, she was dragged off that bus, handcuffed and beaten. 1 year later, in the same place, Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks did the same thing. And their actions, along with the actions of others, galvanized the civil rights movement. So by the time we were in our new home in Des Moines, Iowa, when my little sister Hope and my brother Paul, we'd watch TV and watch the news. One day, we saw the most amazing children there in a place called Birmingham, Alabama. That year, almost 2,000 kids were marching out of their church, standing up against segregation and singing songs like, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." And they kept coming and marching, and they were letting their little light shine. We saw this on TV, and we saw how they didn't stop even when the dogs attacked them, the police dogs, and ripped their legs and ripped their clothing. And they didn't stop when the fire department opened the fire hoses on them, double strength. We thought they were amazing children. And apparently Martin Luther King agreed, because he said that children's action was the turning point of the civil rights revolution, and that he had never seen anything like it. The next year, young people again led a campaign of love, this time in Mississippi, for Mississippi Freedom Summer. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee led a campaign to stand up against the Ku Klux Klan that had been keeping black people in poverty and denying them of their rights, including their right to vote. And they came up with a bold plan, a risky plan of how to take action. They invited college students that year from all over the United States to go to Mississippi and stand with these people and put democracy into action. As soon as the summer started, 3 young people were murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. Their names were Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman. And a call went out all over the country, please, people, come to Mississippi this year so these people aren't killed. And my parents went there. And they returned to Iowa on my 12th birthday. Their birthday gift to me was stories of courage, of how it feels to be inside a house with an older black lady whose house is being shot at just because she tried to register to vote. And they told us of the courage and strength of the young people who stood beside her and stood beside people there that year. The next year, now on TV, we didn't see so much about Birmingham. Now we saw a new horror, the Vietnam War. That year, about 1,000 soldiers had been killed. And when we turned on the TV, us kids saw burning, bombing, children running from their huts in terror. On the ground were body bags for the soldiers. It was Christmas time, and my father would light the Yule candles and teach us the lessons of Christmas, of love and forgiveness. But on TV, us kids saw no forgiveness. We saw war and killing. A 6th grader last summer told me, I see the news and I feel so sad, but I don't know what to do. We felt that way. We didn't know what to do. But the older kids, my brother John and his friend Chris Eckhart and some of the others, Ross Peterson, Bruce Clark, Chris Singer, they came up with an idea. Why don't we just wear black armbands to school like this? And this will be our message, that we're mourning the dead on both sides, and that we're supporting a Christmas truce that was being called for by Senator Robert Kennedy. And they asked us little kids like me and my sister Hope and my little brother Paul, even in 2nd grade, to join them. We were scared. We were nervous. We didn't know if we should, but we wanted to be brave and speak up also. And so we decided to try to join them, and we made our plan, but the principals had another plan. They came up with a rule banning all armbands and saying that any children who wore armbands would be suspended from school. Now I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to get in trouble, but I thought we should be brave and stand up for what we believe in. And I had so many examples of people who did. And so in the end, I did decide to wear my armband to school. I was nervous when I pinned on my armband that morning and walked up to school. Little by little, I started gaining confidence until I saw my math teacher, Mr. Moberly, standing at the door with a pink slip in his hand, telling me to go to the office. In the office, Mrs. Tarman, the girls' advisor, told me to take off my armband. I had had a little tiny bit of courage, and it suddenly ran out. I took off my armband. I gave it to Mrs. Tarman. But she said, you know, I think you're going to be suspended anyway because you broke the rules. I walked home. I was nervous. I was scared. I didn't know what to think. My heart was beating. I wasn't sure what my parents would think. But then I found another great quality of teenagers and young people, persuasiveness. Because I was able to persuade my father and tell him, but Dad, look how you stood up for what you believe in. And my mother supported us as well. We were very lucky. Our parents stood by us because the next day my brother John got suspended and several other students were suspended. It would have been the end of the whole thing except for a group called the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. They told us that they would help us, but that first we should go to the school board and try to change their mind, which we did. And this is my brave mother and my brave father behind me at the school board meeting with some of the other students who were suspended. The school board wouldn't change their mind, though, and the ACLU took the case to court. As the war escalated, the case worked its way through the courts. At the same time, some children in Mississippi had worn buttons to school to protest the killing of the 3 civil rights workers. And they had been suspended, and their case worked its way through the courts. The ACLU was helping us, and some people were supportive of us, but others in town got mad and threatened to bomb our house and threw red paint at our house, calling us communists. One lady even called on the phone and threatened to kill me. My brave parents stood by us, though, and they said, "We're not communists, we're Methodists." And they prayed with us, "Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love." We lost at the district court, and we lost at the appeals level. But at the same time, the kids in Mississippi won their case. And so it was a perfect setup for an appeal to the Supreme Court. The Mississippi kids' case was called Burnside, and when we finally won our case at the Supreme Court, several years later, they cited that case in the ruling, saying that neither teachers or students give up their rights at the schoolhouse gate, and that students are persons under our Constitution with the rights and responsibilities of students. The name of the case was Tinker versus Des Moines, and it was a great victory, not just for us, but for young people all over the country. I grew up and I became a nurse, and I didn't know how important this case was, but one day I was studying for my nursing test, and I saw our case right in my textbook. And that's when I started to realize that this is a larger issue, that this is a human rights issue, that this is a children's rights issue, and that nurses need to know about it. And I found out that lawyers know about it, and that teachers and principals learn about it. And I started to learn more about democracy in school. I learned how democracy expands to include more and more groups that have been previously excluded. When we started our country, our democracy, we had slaves build our White House and our Capitol. Slowly, through people standing up and speaking up, black people gained rights, and then women, Native Americans, immigrants, Chinese, now disabled, and the LGBT community also. And in school, I learned about an amazing man named Paulo Freire from a faraway place called Sao Paulo, Brazil. And I learned that this man was the director of education and that he had a wonderful idea that all people should be respected for their knowledge because all people have knowledge. And that we should seek the input of all people. And he also had the wonderful idea that to expand democracy to new groups, the people in these groups must play an important part in demanding those rights. Working as a nurse, I started to see that young people need to have their rights, and young people will be the next group that we must expand our democracy to. International bodies affirm the rights of young people, including the United Nations, and then regional organizations across the world, in Asia, Africa, Europe, South America. But too often, these affirmations are not monitored and they are ignored. Some young people manage to work around them and assert their rights anyway, like Isadora Faber and others around the world who are standing up and speaking up for their rights. People like New Jude, who stood up against child marriage at age 12. People like Arshan, he stood up for public schools in Chicago last year at 9 years old. People like Malala in Pakistan, who's standing up for the rights of girls to have an education. People like Rosa Clela in Brazil, who's standing up against deforestation. Dreamers, dream defenders, Street children who had the World Cup for Street Children here in Brazil last month. Young people speaking up and standing up for a better way. And as I traveled this year on my Tinker tour for students' rights, I met so many young people who are speaking up and standing up about all of the issues of the day, about bullying and about human rights, rights for women, rights for gay people, rights for animals. Kids who are standing up for the various issues that affect their lives, public schooling funding, standardized testing issues, and so many other things. Names known and names unknown. And I met the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young student journalists who are tweeting about it and blogging it and keeping not only democracy alive, but also the free press alive. I'll end with the words of some young people who recently spoke at the United Nations, imploring the United States to finally ratify the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The young people said, "We are not the problem, we are the solution. You say that we are the future, but we are also the present." Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was amazing. Thank you. I was crying again.